3,
2,
1.
Megan Pearson
And Dylan Coney on the Living Life Authentically podcast.
Here we go. We are actually doing this podcast finally. Okay, I'm Megan.
I'm Dylan.
We are boyfriend, girlfriend, live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and we've decided to make this podcast over, I don't know, we've been talking about this for a couple of months, and I'm very excited that we were just like, hey, let's do this.
Yep.
We've said we're going to do it. Yeah. We're literally here drinking some wine, and we're like, let's do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I'm Megan, you're Dylan. So before we talk about authenticity, before we talk about why we decided to actually do this podcast and whatnot, let's talk about ourselves. Let's be a little bit selfish for a second.
Yeah.
Tell us about you.
Yeah. So I grew up in Didsbury, Alberta, Canada, which is about an hour north of Calgary. I grew up on a farm, which is about 10 minutes west of Didsbury, and moved to Calgary when I was 18, freshly out of high school, and made the decision to go to SAIT for architectural technologies.
Fancy.
For a 2-year diploma program, which is what I do now. And so I've been doing that for, I guess, 3.5 years now, which is crazy to think about, that my 3-year anniversary happened in the middle of this crazy pandemic. But so I've done that for 3.5 years, and I've been at the same company for about 3 years now. I've been at 2 companies in my career. But so I'm an architectural technologist now, which the short synopsis of that is that I design, draft, and manage the construction of commercial buildings. And
people ask me what you do, and I can never answer it. And I know that's the answer you give every time. And I've never memorized that answer.
Yeah, you gotta memorize it.
And I really need to, because people ask me all the time, what does your boyfriend do? And I'm like, you're an architectural technologist.
Yeah.
They're like, what is that? I'm like, he does buildings. That's all I say.
My favorite way to describe it, when people ask me how I got into it, I'm like, I'm an adult who's doing Lego and Minecraft for a living.
And you don't have to step on the Lego.
No,
which is
exactly.
Great. Yep. Bonus.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's literally how I describe it every single time, is that I design, draft, and manage the construction of commercial buildings.
I gotta write that down.
That covers it.
I really need to remember that.
Yeah. What do you do, Megan Pearson?
I am a radio announcer. So I work in country radio, which I love. I grew up listening to country music, and that's kind of what I don't know. That's what I wanted to do even as a kid. I was not the smart kid in school. For you, you are probably good at maths. I was not whatsoever. Even now as an adult, I need to double check what's 20 plus 20 some days. It's bad. But
it's 40, just so you know.
Thank you so much. Right. But I always liked listening to the radio as a kid. I always loved going to concerts. I just loved country music. I'm like, I really want to get into this. So growing up in Okotoks, which is just south of Calgary, I would obviously listen to the big market radio stations in Calgary. I'm like, I want to be like them. I want to be in big markets. So in high school, did part-time radio work, went to SAIT as well, which actually you and I went the same years.
Same year.
In the same building.
Same building. Same wings, and we never ran into each other.
So crazy. We honestly, I wonder if we ever did.
I bet our eyes locked at one point, and I'm like, man, that girl's really cool. But then I'm like, I'm not cool enough to date her.
Okay,
and then I just moved on. Yeah.
Then after school, moved around a little bit, went to Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and then came back to Calgary, which I'm very happy to be here. And now I do a show for 5 hours, on a country station. So I'm very happy about it.
Yeah. Super cool.
So that's about us. Now you know just small facts about us. But we have started an Instagram page for this podcast, Living Life Authentically Podcast. And then we have our handles in both of them as well. So you can follow us and then follow this journey of what we're going to be doing with this podcast, because we're going to try and do this, I think every week we were saying, do an episode.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will start getting guests on this podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about real life stuff. So if you want to be a part of it, also on social media, YouTube, I personally have a YouTube and TikTok page. So we're going to be trying to post on there too. It's going to be a lot.
It's going to be a lot. I'm super excited though for it. And the biggest thing I'm excited about is getting feedback from you guys, and getting feedback from our listeners and people that we know and people that we don't know, saying, hey, this is what I like about what you guys are talking about. This is maybe something I'd like to add, something that I disagree with.
Do you know what the problem is? Is I am such an open person, one, with my job.
Yeah.
So one, every day I go into work and I just am me. I don't put on a fake persona. I don't put on I don't have a fake name on air. Everyone's like, is your real name Megan? Yes, it is. Yeah. I'm so like true in myself on air. And I'm like, why am I nervous about starting a podcast?
I think
like,
it's,
why am I like, why do I need to, why?
No, it's a good like thought process, because I feel the same way with my job. And your job, you're obviously more yourself. But me, I put on my fake tie because I'm working from home, and I put on I'm an architectural technologist persona.
I come to your house and you're on the phone with someone and you have like a different voice on. I'm like, who is this Dylan? Who is he talking to? Why is he so serious?
It's interesting because that is the time that I feel the least authentic, is when I'm talking to someone on the phone, whether it be a contractor, an architect, a coworker on something. That's the time I feel the least authentic. And this podcast, I think, for both of us, because I know you've expressed this in the past, where you feel like when you jump into, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but you jump into a show, doesn't matter what happened before that, doesn't matter what happened the week prior, the day prior, the hour prior to your show, you have to put on a show for everybody. You have to be happy. You have to be, so I think that like, yes, you're authentic in your show, but also there's a deeper side to that of like, well, what's actually happening in your life? What's going on separately from that, right?
I will actually like go on to that point, because we've had even conversations some days where I will have such a crappy day. Yeah. And you've seen this before, where I'm leaving your house. I do not want to go to work. No. And yet I have to put on that smile, that happy face to go on air and make sure everything is fine. And people have asked me, what's the most difficult part about being a radio announcer? Yeah. Like, sure, what's the greatest part? And I get to, before pre-COVID, right? You could go to concerts, you get to meet all these artists. Like, that's so much fun. But I had one time on a TikTok live, somebody asked me, what is the most difficult part about your job? Yeah. I had to think about it and saying, hey, some days I don't want to go to work. Some days I don't want to do this. Right. Yet I have to fake it, basically fake it till you make it, and seem that I want to be there. So that is one part about maybe being a radio announcer that a lot of people don't know, right?
And that's something we might dive into, of like, why or how can you be authentic while still having a job where you can't always be authentic to what you're feeling and authentic to what you're doing in life.
But that being said, I'm not faking it every day.
No,
I want that to be clear
absolutely.
Of when you listen to me on air, what you get is what you get, right? Like, it's not a fake name. It's not fake stories that I'm saying about myself. If I'm saying this is what happened in my life, or I would even bring you into conversations of, look at what my idiot boyfriend Dylan did. Like, I've like called you out plenty of times.
Many times.
Like, gosh, some of the things you do, I'm like, I have to talk about it. I have to, because it is so relatable and so true. And that's what I want my show to be. Yeah. That's what us to be. Yeah. And I've had conversations with people in the past, whether that's exes or friends or family members. I'm like, hey, you said something earlier today. Yeah. Can I bring it onto my show? Yeah. And sometimes people are like, sure, yeah, like, I would love you to do it. And some people are like, yeah, don't mention my name. Or some people are like, no, I don't want that story being said at all. Right. But you and I have built this relationship for, I don't know, 9 out of 10 times something happens and I can talk about it freely on air.
Absolutely.
Right. The one time you're like, maybe not. Let's not like let thousands of people listen to our problems. But for the most part, we're really real and authentic to everybody, whether that's the people around us, people on social media, people on air too.
Yeah. And like, right. Like, if any of my friends are listening to this, they can attest to this, but obviously, like, I try to present myself where you can see right through me. I live life with, and you know this better than anyone, I live life with my emotions, my heart, and everything I believe in on my sleeve. And if someone doesn't know what I believe or what I'm feeling or how I'm like behaving in a situation, it's going to become clear very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think you know that, right? So when that comes to your job and like presenting that on air, I have no problems with it, because that's how I live life regardless.
And we can even talk about this. I remember, because how you just said, you wear your heart on your sleeve in a sense of, I'm not going to hide anything, which is good and bad, because one, you want to show
absolutely. This is my whole life.
You want to show that, yes, I'm an open book and I am trustworthy, but you don't want that trust being taken away because someone's going to take advantage of you.
Yeah. And that's been like a benefit, but also a crux for my entire life of like living with my heart on my sleeve, is that people can easily take advantage of that, right?
I remember on our first date, you were so open. I don't know if you remember this, but like, oh my God, you like laid it out on the table completely.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer, and you know this too. And like, this is something I want to convey with this podcast as well, that I'm a firm believer in the no BS approach, or like, don't waste your time approach. Like, I don't care what your favorite color is. I don't like, especially when we're talking about dating relationships, but this also expands to like friend to friend, coworker to coworker, et cetera, et cetera. I don't care what your favorite color is. I care what your opinion is on bigger topics. I care that all that other stuff, that like non-essential stuff, like what's your favorite color, what's your favorite pastime, that kind of stuff, that comes later. But what I want to know is, what do you believe in? What's important to you? And how are you living that out in your life right now? Mm-hmm. And that's what I tried to get across on our first date. And I think that that like set us up, because I think that set us up farther into a relationship, which we are getting into almost half a year now.
Do you think, oh my God, it has, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. That like took me off guard. I was like, oh yeah, it has been. What if, it's a point of like, what if I wasn't opening up to you? Because I think being authentic partly is being open. Yeah. Right. One, showing your emotions, showing who you are. Yeah. And if you're not being open with that person, you're not really being authentic. That's how I see it, at least.
You're not being open, but I don't think you're necessarily not being authentic.
Okay.
Because there are not many people that are as authentic as I try to be. Yes. I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. But there are very few people. There's only a couple of my friends. There's only a couple of my buddies. Very few men.
Yeah.
Only a couple of my like close friends that are dudes are also identify with the way that I try to live my life of being authentic. So what I'm trying to say is that you can be authentic without being fully open. And what I mean by that is, like, you don't have to spill your heart out to someone the first time you meet them. You don't have to.
You kind of did.
But I did. But
Yes.
what I'm trying to get at, or what I'm trying to say, is that not everyone is like that, and that is completely okay.
That is fair.
That is completely okay. That's not what authenticity means. Authenticity means not holding back what's important at the time that you're talking to someone, at the time that you're diving into something with someone. If you're withholding something that you know is important in that moment, that's when you're not being authentic.
That is true, right?
Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes. Yeah. Why are you hiding something when you know? And it's not saying, everyone has their dirty secrets and everyone has things that they maybe don't want to share.
Not even your dirty. Yeah, exactly. Not want to share at that moment. Like,
but if the situation is there and you are just saying, no, I'm going to push it under the rug, or I can say that when you know, push it under the rug when you know that you need to say it in that moment. Girls are especially very bad, and I'll call us out and saying if something's wrong, and for you as a boyfriend,
I'm fine.
Saying
it's fine.
Yes,
don't worry,
wrong,
I'm fine.
Girls are gonna say, oh, it's fine, when it's really not fine.
And and this has caused not problems, and not rifts, but like intense moments in our relationship where you say it's fine, and I'm like, we're talking about this right now.
Mm-hmm. Right? And you've done that, and I think that's I don't even know how to word this properly, but at least my past relationships, that's not how it's been.
Yeah.
The guy's like, okay, you're fine, cool. Yeah. And then I deal with it internally.
Yeah.
Versus you're like, I see that there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about it. Yeah. We have that open dialogue and conversation and communication, and then we're fine. So it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah. But... And that goes back to what I said earlier, is that I don't want any BS. I don't want any wasted time. If you have a problem, let's deal with it. And like, it doesn't need to be dealt with in this moment, but I'm a firm believer. And I can't even remember who told me this first, or the first time I heard this, but never go to sleep angry, or never go to sleep with something left unsaid that needs to be said. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, things can be left unsaid and you can deal with it another day when you're in maybe a better headspace. But if you need to say something to someone in that moment and you feel that and you're withholding that, That's withholding authenticity in my mind.
Yeah.
Right? If you, like, people say, well, I'm not sure if I should have said that. You know, like, right? Like
More times than not, if you feel like you need to say something,
you do need to say
need to say it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's a huge problem with men. I think that's a huge problem with girls as well. I mean, obviously I'm not a girl, so I can't fully speak to that. But with dudes, I know we withhold so much and bottle it up. And then it comes in an outburst, and that's where 95% of arguments happen between couples, is because stuff gets built up, and then boom, explodes.
So why did you, because it is true how you've said, I don't know, 5 minutes ago, you aren't like other guys, and you are very much, I am going to be very true and authentic, and a lot of guys aren't. So what, like, changed? Like, were you before, was there some point in your life where you're like 80% of the guys who are not saying anything about their problems, who are not communicating how they feel? Was there a turning point in your life that said, hey, I need to get better at this? Was it something with your family? Was it something in a relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a very loaded question.
It is.
And there's lots to it, and like, this is our first episode, so we'll get into it as we go along. But a short synopsis, I would say, is that as a kid, I was very open, and I was very expressive, and I was a loud kid. Okay. And through that, a lot of bullying and beating down and verbal abuse came through with just boys being boys, as they say, which is a bullshit excuse in my mind. But boys being boys, and the fact that, like, a lot of the time I would be expressive, and it would be like called, you're being girlish, you're being feminine, that kind of stuff, where actually I was just being open with the way I was feeling. Mm-hmm. That when someone was like beating me down or saying something derogatory to me, that hurt. And I let it be known. And like, I couldn't hold that in. And I don't know what that was. I don't know why it was like that, but I couldn't hold it in. But the switch, I think, happened for me. And kind of a backstory to this is that my dad has dealt with mental health issues his entire life. And I think the switch happened for me. And I know he's okay with me talking about this because we've talked about it many times. But I think the switch happened for me when he kind of started changing his life around and switching his life to a point of, no, it was no longer woe is me. It was a point of, okay, I have this issue and I have all these issues that I need to deal with. How do I deal with those, and how do I move forward? And
because you and your dad didn't have the best relationship growing up.
No, it was very up and down. And like, a lot of the time it was just, we coexisted. There was no relationship really until I think I was 17. Yeah. We didn't really have a relationship. It was more, he's just my dad. And that's how it was. And I think that was a nature of a lot of things. It was a nature of how he grew up. It was a nature of, men at the time that he grew up. And then also just like circumstances that happened in his life that developed some hardships and mental health challenges in his own life. Mm-hmm. And that extrapolated itself onto me. And then by the grace of God, like, God got a hold of his heart and changed him. And I think that's where the switch happened for me, where I'm like, I'm no longer going to live in fear of my emotions. I'm no longer going to live in fear of what people think of me. No longer going to live in fear of what the world thinks of me. I'm going to live the way I want to. And that's going to take over everything in my life. And I think that's where kind of the shift happened. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are fearful of being authentic.
Oh, 100%. I'm fearful of being authentic. And I'm fearful of being authentic because I'm afraid of what the person listening and the person watching is thinking of me right now. That's happening in my heart right now. But part of being authentic is getting over that hump and being like, you know what? It's time to do it. It's time to be authentic. Let it all out of the bag. Don't care what people think. I'll take feedback. I'll take what people say, what people think. But if it's derogatory or if it's not constructive.
Like the amount of times that I've got told, I don't like the way you speak. I don't like the way you sound. I don't like the way you look.
Yep.
It's so many times.
Yep.
At some point, you just got to listen to who you want to get the feedback from.
Yeah.
If they're not somebody that you want to improve from or learn from or want to become, why are you taking feedback from them?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So if Joe Blow across the street says, oh, I don't like the way your hair is, who cares? I don't care who that person is, right? So yeah, we're all worried about what everyone's thinking, but if you just want to live the way you want to live and just be who you want to be, no one else's opinion matters. In mine.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. No one else's opinion matters.
No, exactly. Like, I think for me, it's not necessarily that extreme where it's like nobody's opinion matters. I think there's certain people in my life that I've set up a support system with, that if a person came to me and said, hey, I think that this is not a good thing in your life, or I think you should be doing it this way. There's certain people in my life that I'll take that from and I'll be like, that's something I should consider. Mm-hmm. If somebody DMs me on Instagram, Facebook, I know you get this more than me, but if anybody like reaches out to me other than like people that I know and love and say something like that, then I'm not going to take it. But if there's somebody like my parents or some of my best friends that say something to me that, hey, you should change this, or you should consider this, or, hey, I don't necessarily think this is the best idea, I'm going to take that as gold and then evaluate it.
Am I included in that?
Yeah. Thanks. You'll make the cut.
Okay, good.
Yes, you're included in that. Okay, like, good. For example, if I was doing something, even with my job, because you see, now that I work from home, you see some of what I do, right?
Yeah.
And if you said, hey, like, you didn't really behave very well on that call, and because I've been stressed with my job lately, if like I blow up on somebody on a call, which I don't do very often, but if I blew up on somebody on a call and you said, hey, I don't know if you really responded very well to that person, or like you should change the way that you respond in that situation the next time it happened, I'm not going to throw that away because it's somebody else's opinion.
Yeah.
I know that like your opinion matters because you know who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's something that is key as well for people to understand, is that you need to have those people in your life, because if you have nobody telling you that there's something wrong, you're never going to think there's something wrong. You're going to live your entire, if you could be completely off the rails.
Yep.
Right. And you never think that there's something wrong until somebody that is really important in your life and you trust tells you that something's wrong.
Yes. And if it's too late, though, if you've been going on, like you said, years doing one thing, and then all of a sudden someone comes in your life and says it, you're going to react in such a bad way, because you're like, no, I've been doing it this way for this many years. No one said anything.
Hard. And that's really hard.
Yeah. Totally.
And I think that's something important for younger people than us even to realize too, is you need to build those support systems.
Yeah.
That's important. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard to make friends that are that close, that tight. I know, for example, for you, you have a lot of friends that are really tight with you. I only have a few that are really tight and like know me fully. Right. So it's sometimes harder for me to like get that feedback from people. Right. But I think that's important, that when you're growing up, you need to realize that like you need to make sure that the people that are closest to you are trustworthy and that you trust them and that you can fully open up to them, be authentic, and get proper feedback from them. I think that's really important.
We've dived in a lot.
We've dived in. This is supposed to be the intro video and intro podcast.
No,
but
this
I think
is good.
This is really good, yeah.
Because I think we've introduced a lot of part of our lives.
Yeah, we've set the baseline, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So, like we said, we're going to be doing this podcast once a week, hopefully. Yeah. We'll be talking about other things that are going on in our lives.
Yeah.
But we have an Instagram page, the Living Life Authentically Podcast.
Yep.
We have both of our Instagram pages that are open for DMs.
Yep.
We have my TikTok. We have YouTube. We have a ton of different ways that you can follow us and that you can be a part of our lives.
Reach out.
We're going to ask, though, that you give us questions and you give us advice of, hey, you know what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah.
I'm in this situation in my life and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So if that is you and you're thinking, hey, these two idiots can help me, then we're going to try our best.
Yeah, exactly. Like, in no way is this podcast about like, hey, this is a 101 on how to be authentic. No, this is a conversation, first of all, with us two, and we're kind of the hosts of it. But ultimately, we want feedback from you guys and our listeners and our viewers of saying, hey, this is what we want to hear. This is what we want to talk about. We have questions about this. We might not have the answers, but we're going to find people who might have the answers or might have a better perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important as well. And I think another important anecdote to kind of make a synopsis of what this podcast is about, this isn't going to be about the highs. This is not going to be about the lows. It's going to be about all of it. It's going to be about when living life authentically is easy, when living life authentically is hard, when living life in general is easy, when living life in general is hard. And I think that's super important, especially in the time that we're living in right now, where my week to week, especially, like, I'm speaking just for me, my week to week, 1 week can be super high, 1 week can be super low.
Yeah, it's the hills and valleys. That
Exactly. And I think that's exaggerated this day and age with everything that's happening in our world, with cultural changes, cultural shifts, COVID, everything that's happening in our world, right? I think the highs and lows are exaggerated. So I think we want to dive into like what happens during lows, what happens during our highs, what happens when we're neutral.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Cool.
So.
I'm excited for next week's podcast. Again, thank you for listening. Big thanks as well to our friends Melissa and Matt who have voiced our podcast.
Yes. Oh,
intros
huge.
And extras that sound
Awesome.
like we're actually professional. Like we actually know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you for listening to our podcast. I love you, Dylan. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, this is great. See you guys next week.